Greetings, conscious family. Minister Ra here. It has been a long time, a long, long time, but we're getting back on track with the mission, with the vibes. And I wanted to post a video that I had been meaning to post for a couple months now, going in sequence with the theme that I had initiated around decolonizing the mind. I had done a presentation at one of my conscious connections gathering earlier in the year, and it was about understanding the mind in the context of the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind versus the superconscious mind. And I'm going to be playing a snippet of that presentation that I did for you guys so that I can further break down topics around this theme for our education. And so I hope you find some value in this video, and I hope it helps you on your journey. But Minister Ra is back, so stay tuned. I'm going to be back on track with posting more content, and hopefully this information will help you on your personal journey. So stay tuned for more. Thank you guys so much for watching.
So yeah, as I mentioned, we're continuing on this whole theme of decolonizing the mind. And we had a great discussion in the last meeting we had, which spoke of the significance of doing this and the steps that we could take towards engaging in this process of decolonizing the mind. And I think a big aspect of doing this starts with just becoming aware. I think some people tend to undermine this notion of becoming very aware of our thoughts, of our habits, of the actions that we take daily, because all of this becomes important because it shows what is happening inside. It shows where our meditation is. It shows where we're connected to and from. That expression in the outward, it's only a reflection of what's happening inwardly. And so it becomes very important to become aware and self-aware, and to then be able to consciously choose what we want to break away from, what is not truly reflecting who we are, or our innermost truths. And we then have to consciously act and change these things and reprogram our minds. And this in itself is a process. I feel like we're all aware that this whole endeavor can take years, and I would not say, I don't want to necessarily say that or focus on the ideal that it's just hard and complicated process. um but it does have its challenges. But I feel like each of us, if we spend the right amount of time and dedicate ourselves towards improving in the ways that we want to, it's definitely possible. Definitely takes time, definitely takes effort and dedication. But we can all agree that a lot has been imposed upon us that consciously we didn't choose, and generationally we're carrying, and we must choose to release ourselves from that, and to break the shackles that have been impacting us and the generation before us, in whatever ways that we can, so that we can live in truth and live in full alignment with our highest self. So as mentioned, we'll be speaking about the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious minds, with the aim of tapping into true sovereignty, with the aim of taking ownership and full control over what it is that we are manifesting within this time and space of our lives. So just to go over why this whole process of decolonizing the mind is important. The mind has been conditioned, as mentioned before, by different system of powers throughout the last several millennia, whether that be through societal programming or limiting beliefs that have been carried generationally, or even generational trauma. And it is important, as mentioned, because we're especially within this time where where awareness and consciousness is at such a high level. We can now reclaim the sovereignty. We can truly walk in our own truth and embody that, and not moving from a space of fear, in expressing what truly resides within us uniquely. And all of this expression adds to the collective consciousness, adds to raising the collective consciousness, which is what we need now. So another important point is, when we consciously direct our mental energies, we create from a place of true power and not programming. And that is very profound, because I feel a lot of times, especially in this time period, with this whole age of influencers and all these different public figures, it's like we may tend to lean onto others in that way to get validation, or to you know to seek some form of acceptance in terms of whatever we have for ourselves. But the reality is that we all have our own unique expressions, and each individual expression or angle of light that is within us, that is desiring to be expressed, it's its own blessed expression, it's its own profound expression. And so we're all influencers, and we're all, you know innately divine, and your light should equally be shone amongst everyone and shown to the rest of the world, without there needing to be any fear or any drawback because of what you might perceive as negative opinions or anything of that nature. Like, you're here to shine your light, and it's time for you to be in a place of fully accepting yourself for who you are, and accepting what it has been there for you, and what needs to be shown to others at this time. And not even for others, but just for you, because it allows for, it's like, once you begin to move into your rhythm, everything will naturally begin to fall into place more organically for you, with more ease. But it's like, if we don't allow for that expression, then there's going to be this disconnection from the source. And we'll kind of go into this a little bit more in the next couple of slides. But I thought it would be cool to just define a few words that will come up under this theme. And the first one is going to be consciousness. And consciousness could be defined as the essence of existence, or is the essence of existence itself. It is pure awareness, infinite presence, and the formless intelligence that animates all things. It is not limited to the mind, but rather exists beyond it. And the mind now is the non-physical aspect of consciousness that acts as the bridge between the spiritual and material worlds. It is the seat of thought, perception, memory, imagination, and will. And sovereignty, which I'll be probably using a few times, a few more times, is the state of being in full authority, autonomy, and dominion over one's own consciousness, energy, and reality. It is a realization that the power to create, perceive, and shape one's life comes from within, rather than being dictated by external forces. And this is the state of being that, as humanity on a whole, really needs to reconnect with. As I mentioned, I feel like now it's even more evident than ever that so much of our thoughts, our actions, and our habits are driven by external forces, for profit nowadays. Our attention or energy is really just used for profit. It's just to feed other people's pockets. And more people need to really become more aware of how we ought to be, utilizing our intention, utilizing our energy, not in that context, but in the context of expressing, what is divinely and innately in us, for for the expression of our highest self, to inspire others to move in that same space. And the more of us that do that, you know the more the planet, and the connection between ourselves and the planet, and nature and the universe falls into place to create, I believe, this more heaven on earth type of an experience. But the more disconnected we are, then the more this reality will carry a lower state of vibration and expression from that energetic standpoint. So moving on to the three aspects of the mind. So as I mentioned, it's the conscious mind, the subconscious, and the superconscious. So for the conscious mind, or it can be, described as the architect. Joseph, that's you, man. But the conscious mind, it's about the present awareness. It deals with logic, reasoning, and focus. Whereas a subconscious mind, that's the programmer. It stores memories, emotions, and beliefs that shape automatic behaviors, which a vast majority of our experiences of living is predicated on these automatic behaviors. And the superconscious mind is the divine creator. This is the highest self, connected to source energy, infinite intelligence, and universal truth. So, each level interacts to create what we're experiencing within this plane. And so it as I mentioned, it becomes very important for everyone to understand how these different attributes of our mind correlates, and not just with the minds, but even our energy bodies, which will be something I move into at in the coming meetings. But understanding how energetically and mentally, how the alignment is very important to get the purest and most elevated expression amongst ourselves and within our lives. And this in itself really helps with breaking away from the decolonized vibes or effect that we're unfortunately suffering from at this point. So just to go into a little bit more with the conscious mind. So as mentioned, it's the active part of the mind that observes, reasons, and makes choices, right? You can think of it as the gatekeeper that filters between, reality well, it filters, um, sorry, let me read that over. So you can think of it as the gatekeeper that filters reality based on beliefs held in the subconscious. So there's so many things happening in the subconscious because whether you believe it or not, your eyes, your ears, all these senses are perceiving so many different things, so many neural signals, so many different things happening throughout the day, every second, every minute. And the conscious mind is choosing to, it's what is filtering through all these different perceptive signals. And so as is mentioned, it is the gatekeeper that is filtering through all these different things so that we are focused on particular, you know, things that we want to be focused on. But it doesn't mean that because we're focused on this, that means nothing is happening external of that focal point. So in the subconscious, there's so many things being, digested or processed, and the conscious mind helps us to stay, focused on whatever it is that our attention is on within that particular time or moment. And so this goes back to alluding to the fact that it is the logical and the analytical aspect of our perception. But funny enough, it only accounts for 5% of our daily, actions, because the vast majority comes from where it comes from the subconscious mind, because that's where the vast majority of things are being processed and held. And that being said, it would go to show why it's so important that we spend a lot of time going within, because that's where so much of what we're dealing with resides. It resides within, you know. So how can the conscious mind be colonized? So the conscious mind can be colonized, conditioned through thought patterns from media, you know, culture, authority figures, this idea of reactive thinking instead of intentional creation, or even intentional thinking. It can be colonized from the fear-based narrative that suppresses personal power, which again is another major theme in society these days. It's the divisiveness that is being brought amongst us as people, as humanity on the globe, and the fear-based ideals or narratives that is also pushed on us based on what's happening, whether through wars or different activities that keep us in these lower state vibratory spaces, which is what we have to move beyond and we have to elevate ourselves from. So how do we reclaim, you know, sovereignty, or reclaim our conscious mind? Well, this can be done through mindfulness, awareness, being aware of our thoughts, especially doing it from a detached space, where we're being more of an observer to what is happening, and using the breath, for example, to help with just centering ourselves like we did at the beginning. And so we use mindfulness, critical thinking to question that, why it is that we have our belief in these different narratives, and really understanding the connection between what is being perceived and the things that we have within us as the narratives that we're, living from, and then the last thing for reclaiming it would be the conscious intentions, and that has to do with rewriting our mental scripts. And this is very powerful because it's something I've had to do for myself, especially a lot last year, where the vast majority of the day I spent time really visualizing and repeating to myself what I consciously want and what I consciously, the framework that I want to consciously be coming from or to relay, outwardly. And you have to think that, for how many odd years of your life you spent being programmed based on what you had from different time periods of your life, whether from childhood, teenage years, adulthood, or phase of your adulthood, and you carried all that programming that you received from the external world. And so to flip the switch on that, it's not an overnight process, as I was describing. It's not something that's, it's just going to happen tomorrow. Not that it's impossible, but for the average person who is not necessarily going under hypnosis or all these, maybe these other techniques, that is really just, trying to reprogram it yourself, like, in a very step by step type of process. It's going to take time, and it is literally rewriting the script. It is literally reprogramming and kind of setting a new stage, for yourself with respect to how you live and how you think. And it's like recreating yourself consciously. And that is the important part, doing it consciously. And I can say for myself that it's definitely possible and it's worth it, especially if you're trying to live from a different place and create a different narrative for your life and the experience that you want to have. And so moving to the subconscious mind, which we described as a programmer, as I mentioned before, it stores the past experiences, the traumas, emotions, and conditioned beliefs. And it operates below awareness, but it dictates 95% of our behaviors, our reactions, and habits. And it runs automated programs pretty much because we, as humans, we can call, we're like, I wouldn't say mini computers, but we're like computers because within our brains and within our systems, there's so many different processes taking place that are being run, from the neuronal aspect of our makeup, whether through the neurotransmitters and all these different electrical processes that are being regulated throughout the body. We are literally programmed entities. And so it is important to understand this and to realize the significance of why we have to consciously choose, once we become self-aware, the type of programs that we want to be run within our lives. So, in relation to how the subconscious mind can be colonized, again, this is the subconscious mind is connected from the space of generational trauma, ancestral wounds. And when I say generational trauma and ancestral wounds, you have to think we're we're not disconnected. We I think we are, for you guys already know that we're all energy, and so energy obviously cannot be created or destroyed. So what would that mean from a more personal standpoint? It would then mean that your parents who created you and their parents and their parents and so on all have a connected lineage energetically. And so whether from a traumatic standpoint or not, happened within their lives have been translated in the form of DNA, which creates genes, which creates our physical expression. And this transference of energy and of information, it carries over even into our experience. And so a lot of things that we might be dealing with subconsciously or we might not necessarily be able to pinpoint why they're happening, to us, or where it's coming from. And a lot of times it can be coming from our ancestry. And so when you are moving through these processes of doing your meditations and having your mindfulness sessions, you actually have to incorporate the ancestral aspect of this whole experience. It's not just you. you're tied to maybe, who knows, thousands, hundreds of thousands of millions of years of bloodline, of ancestry. And you're now at this point to consciously heal and remove the blockages that have been carried over onto you that you might not be fully conscious of. So it is important that we bear that in mind throughout this process for ourselves. And so, moving to the next point, having repetitive conditioning from childhood and school, religion, or at home, amongst family, these different issues definitely contribute to colonizing the subconscious mind in this context. And as well as unresolved emotional imprints that manifest as blocks or blockages in adulthood. You might be, whether throughout your day-to-day or social activities, you operate a certain way. You wonder, like, okay, why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I acting this way in a relationship? Why am I so sensitive to this? Why am I so unresponsive to this? There's a reason behind it. And these things can be, a lot of the times, be manifesting because of different events or different emotional blockages that have been created and have been unresolved throughout our lives. So how do we reclaim, power over the subconscious mind? Well, it starts with doing shadow work, doing the inner child healing that we discussed previously, releasing the stored emotional imprints, reprogramming ourselves through the affirmations and visualizations, to pretty much rewrite the limiting beliefs that we're carrying through breath work, somatic healing, or aka bodily healing, and releasing, which allows us to release the suppressed energy held in the body. So in one of the previous meetings that I think Veronica was on, because she does an inner child healing, she, I think, mentioned some stuff on that whole process, and how, these emotional blockages, these energetic blockages, they do in fact get stored within the body, and not just within the physical body, because whatever you're feeling on the physical body, it is happening in the other energetic bodies before it gets to the physical body, because the physical body is a representation of the how you put it, like the slower, or the slowest version of 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 the vibratory expression. The physical expression is like at this much slower vibratory rate compared to that of the etheric body or the astral body, etc. You know, and so it is important to realize that these different blockages, they're happening for various reasons, but they are creating different manifestations in your life, not just emotionally, but from a health standpoint, with this eases that we're facing, are with certain physical challenges or psychological challenges, they all have a root within the emotional imprints and various energetic blockages that are taking place within the body. So it is very important to address these things through the inner child healing, through getting Reiki, through doing, other somatic healing work or the mindfulness work, to at least begin that process to free up the energy within the body so that you can have better alignment. And move into the superconscious mind.
Ra, can I ask
Yes.
a quick question? What is shadow work?
So shadow work pretty much has to do with the practice of spending time to really analyze the thoughts, the the actions that would kind of be deemed as negative, and the emotions and negative emotional patterns that you're dealing with, and spending time to address them by becoming self-aware of what they are. So let's say, for example, let me try to find something negative. You are, I don't know, let's say you're just a very sensitive person, or you're always seeking validation, or there's just some negative expression to always wanting validation from people. And so the shadow work behind that whole process would be you taking time to become self-aware as to why it is that this is happening. So the shadow aspect is just relating to the negative patterns that you are experiencing, living through, that needs to be addressed. So the shadow is the quote unquote dark experiences that you're having that would be deemed as negative, or the events that you're doing, or the practices that you're partaking in that aren't really helping you to get elevated. And the work just alludes to you spending time to become self-aware and integrative with the practices that you need to do to kind of resolve and handle those issues. So that is what shadow work really is speaking to. It's just the work that you have to do to elevate yourself beyond the negative patterns that you might not be conscious of, but that you are carrying or practicing throughout your life, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, brother. So, the super conscious mind, it's that direct bridge between the divine wisdom and manifestation, and it's always guiding, but a lot of the times drowned out by the subconscious noise and distractions. And hence why it is so important to hold space for mindfulness. Hence why it is important that once you wake up in the morning, you got to think about it. Like, you wake up in the morning, your mind opens. You sometimes you don't remember you don't remember the dream you had. You don't remember where you're coming from, but all of a sudden you land back right here, and it's like, in just taking a moment to really process that whole event of waking up, you know, being back in the body, being back in the physical, and seeing the significance of holding space for some brief moments to just ensure that you're fully aligned, ensure that where your thoughts are, it's not coming from this distracted place, it's not coming from this place of worry or of fear, or because all of these things matters. What you're giving space to energetically within is what is going to create externally what you're experiencing. So throughout the day, not just when you wake up, but just throughout the day in general, you want to be programming your mind to be very aware of what you're giving space to, because as I said, it drowns out the intuitiveness of the superconscious mind. Because you could wake up and the first thing you're worrying about is, man, how am I going to pay that next thing? Man, I have this thing that I have to do, and that's my, all these different priorities that become distractions, or the things that we put as priority over the divine connection that we innately have, and we forget about it. But it's at the end of the day, the more connected we are to that, the more the answers we can have to solve these issues or challenges that we're facing. So how how can the superconscious mind be colonized? And when I say colonized, it's just a matter of speaking of it being the disconnectedness of from the superconscious mind. So it's being disconnected from your intuition, from your higher powers, if you will, through excessive logic or external influences. As I mentioned, in the form of anxiety, being stressed, being in a fear-based you know context, or fear-based belief systems. And these are lower states of thought and or energetic expression. It's going to it's like being in this distracted space. It puts you on a whole different channel. You have HBO and what stars and all these different channels. Is like all these different channels have their particular frequency that they're at. Fear-based belief system is not going to be on the same frequency as our divine intuitive, connectedness to superconscious frequency. That's a whole different vibe. So within our day-to-day experience, we have to give more way to that, more connected, intuitive space. And we do this by the mindfulness, the meditativeness, the more connective, space that we foster within our day-to-day life. That's what we really have to give priority to. And so we drone that out when we focus on everything else that's happening, we focus on all the distractions, all the glitz and glamour of the external world. We have to give time and space for fostering that more connected wavelength, to improve the intuitiveness within our own life experiences. So, naturally, how you would reclaim it is by doing the deep meditation and, having those silent practices. Never underestimate the power of silence. Never underestimate the power of just holding space for yourself, energetically, by just sitting and just being chill. Just even if it's for a couple minutes, you'd be surprised. Because what we have to also understand is that life, from an energetic standpoint, has its own natural rhythm. Nature has its own natural rhythm. You feel the wind blowing, you see the ocean flowing, all these things has an invisible rhythm behind it, and your life has its own unique rhythm that you have to give away to by just sitting yourself down sometimes and just allowing yourself to just flow, just breathe and relax. And again, you don't underestimate how powerful that is, because it allows there to be more resonance between your flow, the super conscious flow, and the universal flow that is within existence. Because all of them have their own unique vibratory expression. And you, in order to connect with that, it's not going to be coming from fear-based, distracted spaces. So giving yourself that time to connect from that space, even if it's in silence, will have profound effect for you, right? So, as I mentioned before, doing energetic attunements, whether that is through Reiki, chakra healing, breath work. There are so many different practices, nowadays, that are being offered to help with energetic attunement. And I encourage you guys to definitely, take time to receive in this way. I feel like some of us here are more givers of this work, but as givers too, we have to take time to receive a lot of the time, so that we can be in full attunement, and having faith and trust in divine timing, surrendering to the flow and the universal intelligence. That's definitely an important part of this whole process, right? So, speaking on the impact of colonization on the three minds, colonization disrupts the natural flow between the minds. The conscious mind becomes externally programmed, limiting creative thought. The subconscious mind stores fear, trauma, hatred, sometimes doubt, all these negative beliefs that prevent further expansion. And then what that translates to is the superconscious mind being ignored, the intuitive aspect of our being ignored, because of this disconnection. And so we a lot of times, before people get to this awake, quote unquote awakened state, it's the dependency has been on so much on external sources, whether that be friend, family, religion, all these different things. And there had not been as much time focusing on the more intuitive guidance until you, at whatever point that happens for us individually, you become, self-aware of the fact that there is something speaking through you and to you, that is giving you these nudges. And the more you kind of shut out the distractions and give way to that, then the more you can move into this flow, through that more divine connection. And again, that in itself is a process. So the result of this colonization, right, is the creation of a fragmented version of ourselves, where you feel stuck in limiting patterns, survival mode, and spiritual disconnection. Having this disarray between the minds and the energetic bodies is going to create that fragmentation. It's going to create this up and down, don't know where to go, versus having this more trusted, you know, um, I guess you can say, faith-based dynamic where you're trusting in the divine flow, you're trusting in the intuitive guidance that is leading your life, And in order to really move into that space, you really have to spend time to really program yourself to receive that. So in decolonizing the mind through wholeness, integration is key. True sovereignty comes when we consciously choose what we allow into our awareness. And and it's funny nowadays because of like social media, for example. It's like as soon as you open your phone, you'll have a thought before opening your phone. You're opening your phone, and the moment you open your phone, the trail of thought that you had gets lost because you immediately become distracted based on what is in front of you, that's on the media, that's on these social platforms. And it's obviously designed that way. It's designed to, I don't want to say rob you of your attention, but to take away your attention, and so we have to really become aware of the fact that we have to consciously choose what we're allowing in, and what we're making space for, within our mind. So in addition to consciously choosing is to reprogram the subconscious to align with empowerment, truth, righteousness, love, gratitude, allowing those things to be the foundation of our expression. And all in all allowing us to reconnect with the superconscious to be able to receive and perceive divine guidance in a much more profound way. And so wholeness happens when all three are working in sync, are working in harmony, not bombarded by the distractions and the traumas, and the negative limiting beliefs that are carried forward. And it's up to us, being where we are now, becoming aware of all these things, to really choose on a daily basis to resolve these things for ourselves, to taking time to journal, to write these things down and addressing them, and know that you're being guided and aided throughout this process of doing so. The mere fact that you have awareness of it, it's profound in itself to allow you to get to that point where you need to resolve it, once you have the awareness of that issue, but it's choosing to actually accept the reality that you want to move from it versus not, because a lot of us get up and choose the same thing every single day, even though it's negatively harming us. So I can't choose it for you. We all have to choose for ourselves, what we want that external expression to be. So, just to speak briefly on the energetic integration process, it's the daily awareness practices, as I mentioned, observing the thoughts, questioning the conditioned responses, really becoming aware of how we respond to things. Sometimes, we'll be around people and they'll say, why, how comes you're, so and so, or how come you're responding this way? Or like, what's up with this energy? Or, take note of these things, because sometimes people reflect what we are carrying a lot of the times, and they will also help us to identify where our energy is at. And in seeing that and in hearing that, we can use that to help us to tweak, what it is that we're expressing and the energy that we're expressing. And so doing the inner work and the healing, addressing the subconscious patterns through meditation and emotional release, as I mentioned, and also adding to the divine connection through cultivation of stillness and surrendering to the divine guidance, and adding the intentional actions through aligned thoughts, emotions, and actions with our highest self. And the goal of all this at the end of the day, as we were discussing, is to decolonize the mind and merge in the different aspects of our mind, to create this more sovereign aspect of our expression, and one might ask, well, what is this sovereign or higher perspective of ourselves? What does that actually entail? Like, how do I actually identify this? And it the highest expression of ourselves is going to be coming from a unique place for each of us, because we're all uniquely designed, you know, interestingly, millions of beings, but we're all uniquely designed. And that highest expression of ourselves, it's a unique expression that is within you. And more than likely, it embodies an evolving process as well. Um, because we are infinite beings. And so it's not really say about a highest version of ourselves as this destination, but it's understanding our development as this ever evolving process that we are exploring and expressing and just everyday blossoming in that process, you know. But you're inspired daily through that higher version of yourself, and it's just consciously choosing to be operating from that more aligned space, you know, based on what is bringing you true fulfillment. So your next steps to sovereignty, you know, a lot of this pretty much would be a little redundant, because I've mentioned, you know, having to be more aware and making space for healing through the different mediums that are available to us, you know, whether through energetic work or, you know, somatic work, or breath work. There's so many things to get, and there's no wrong or right in choosing a path. It's really about starting and choosing, and see how you respond, um, to these different mediums of healing to be able to, you know, further transcend. Because, you know, what might work for me, it might not work for, you know, for Linda, or it might not work for Joseph. So you know, we all have to explore and not be afraid to explore what might work for us, because again, we're all unique beings, you know. And, you know, embodiment, you know, wherein we're living in alignment with that highest expression and creating realities from wholeness and not conditioning, not from what mommy daddy taught us, not from what society taught us, or just from what school taught us. We all know that what we've received from those external sources, sure, not all of it is negative, of course, but it's to bring you to this level. But then you have to choose your expression at some point. You have to choose how you are going to be uniquely and divinely, you know, relating to the external world. And that embodiment really is best when you have this full integration from, you know, your conscious, subconscious, and um, superconscious mind. And so while I was preparing this, you know, a verse had came to me, which I always think is so deep, because I feel like a lot of us, or you know, a lot of people tend to be caught up in the physical and material aspect of this experience. And, you know, the truth and fact of the matter is, a lot of what we're dealing with is not physical. You know, it's really on an energetic plane, you know, that we're needing to address the things that as you know, humanity on a whole, that we have to address to transcend where we're at. And, you know, the verse that came to me was Ephesians 6:12. You know, you know, this was just an intuitive nudge, so I took it and I just ran with it, you know. So I said I'd share it. And it, you know, it reads, you know, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And so, you know, as I mentioned just now, it's not necessarily all about the flesh and blood, or all about the physical, but it's the intangible. It is the immaterial, the non-physical aspect of this experience that we really have to be paying attention to. You know, that aspect of this experience is really driving a lot of what we're experiencing here, you know, on this planet. And so for us as conscious beings, as people who are more aware, you know, we really have to spend time focusing on, you know, the mental side of our experience, the spiritual side of our experience, and moving into that space to then have the impact that we should from that space, to offset a lot of this negative, programming that has impacted our people at this time. So I just thought I'd share that so that we can really see how serious it is, even from a religious standpoint, that it's really about the non-physical aspect of this experience that we really have to take accountability for.
Thanks again so much, guys, for taking the time to watch another one of my videos. If you found the video insightful, helpful on your journey right now, definitely take the time to drop a like on the video. If you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell for when more videos get uploaded. I look forward to continue sharing with you guys and sharing in the journey of growth, of authentic expression, of spiritual development. And I look forward to seeing you all flourish. Sending you all love and gratitude as per usual. Stay blessed, everyone. Peace.